everybody. My name is Angie. I'm your host for today's Coffee Tea Chat, and we have an amazing person today. His name is Javon. And without further ado, I will now pass this on to him.
Hey everyone. Today we're doing the administrator box on HackTheBox. I'm inspired from the Lane Kusanagi OSCP list. I just started going through the Pen 200 course, doing some of the boxes to just build my methodology and test things out. If you see any ways that I can improve my methodology or any cool tips or tricks, please let me know. I already ran the Nmap scan. We did standard scripts, services, very verbose, just see like the TTL, and we output all to scan results. We can see that we have DNS, Kerberos, RPC, LDAP. There's some SMB in there. There's also NetBIOS running. As you can see here, pretty much the first thing that we do, since this is an assumed breach scenario, we were provided credentials. Let me just copy those over. Is essentially test and see what the credentials has access to.
By the way, I do appreciate you doing the Nmap scan beforehand because that can take some time, folks, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
All the different options you can do with Nmap is insane.
So we're just going to paste the credentials in here. These were the provided credentials. Essentially, what I'm going to do now is just use to see where we have access to. I also created a variable for target. So if you see me run target, the IP is stored in that variable.
That's a smart idea. Because a lot of people will just put in the IP address and then, it can get repetitive.
Yeah, I started doing that recently. I don't know why I didn't start doing that sooner, but it really helps when you create a sort of cheat sheet of your commands and it says target. All you have to do is just basically run the commands and fill in your credentials. So it definitely helps for time purposes. We can access SMB. So let's list out shares actually. These are all default shares, nothing particularly interesting. You can run the spider module and essentially grep the output for any useful credentials, so like user or password. Sometimes there's PP password abuse present in XML files within sysvol or the policies directory. For this box, that isn't necessarily the case. It seems to mainly be just chaining a lot of vulnerabilities together. We're going to get into that shortly. We do have WinRM access. LDAP. And then we also have TP. So the credentials are valid, but this is just typically like what you would do. But FTP is running here. This particular user can't access the FTP shares. So we'll get more into that as we progress through the box. Essentially, you want to iteratively test your credentials against, commonly vulnerable services just to ensure that one, your credentials work, and two, anytime you pick up new credentials, you want to see if it can access anything different compared to the users that you already own. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run Bloodhound. So this is the collector, Bloodhound C Python collector, and we're going to collect all for the domain administrator.htb, Olivia, the password, output, and we're going to do verbose just so we can see what's going on.
Right. Yeah, this is a really important tool to learn, especially if you want to get into red team, pen testing, Bloodhound. Very good. I'm glad we're doing this today, this specific room.
This is the output. I actually should have put it inside of this directory, but it's too late for that. But I already have it sort of uploaded. Oops. We're going to Docker compose our Bloodhound so that we can access the web UI and start visualizing JSON files that we receive from the collector.
You know what's funny? When it comes to that term JSON, sometimes I hear it as JSON. I don't know where I heard that from, but I heard one friend say Jason, and then I hear a lot of folks in America say Jason. And sometimes I'm like, you know what? If we're gonna have this little debate, just do JSON.
Yeah,
Just spell it out this way. But
it's similar to GIF and GIF almost.
yeah,
Like if you're doing this for the first time, what you'd want to do is you go to administration, file ingest, and upload files. Typically, I use Legacy Bloodhound, but I started recently getting into sort of like the Bloodhound CE, so it's kind of like a different layout. But you just upload the files here, and essentially it'll just help you visualize all the objects in Active Directory in a node format. So as you can see here, if we type in the user that we already have, it's something that we own, hence the skull. You can go through the information here and see properties. Sort of like the main interesting thing to look at here would be member of. Nothing particularly stands out here, but if you check outbound object control, you can see that we have object control over the user Michael using generic all, meaning that we can do a force change password and change the password for the user Michael in order to own Michael. We'll just mark that as owned for now. And then we'll check the member of permissions as well. Same permissions as Olivia. Nothing particularly stands out there, but there is outbound objects controlled to a user named Benjamin, who also has the force change word, who we also have the force change password property over. Essentially, we can change the password of Benjamin as well, and then we'll have the user Benjamin. We go through here, we don't see any outbound object control that's interesting, but we do see a difference here in the sense that Benjamin is a share moderator, meaning that once we have control over the user Benjamin, we're probably able to access some kind of SMB or FTP share that Benjamin has access to. If you just plug in Benjamin so that we can visualize the attack path here, we can see we're going to go from Olivia to Michael, and then from Michael to Benjamin. That's pretty much what we're going to do so far to see if we can escalate privileges and find more users and potentially take over the domain.
I really do like that map, by the way, that's visualized because
Yeah,
sometimes can be really unorganized when you're trying to do, for example, like a pen test or something. So I really do appreciate that visualizations. You can take like screenshots, record as you
yeah,
go. This is really good practice for those, especially if you're into pen testing or even cybersecurity in general. Like learn how to document your stuff and get it organized like this, for example.
I would definitely say as you're doing boxes, especially in preparation for the OSCP, that's a big part. I feel like sometimes when people get into penetration testing or offensive security, they forget that the main goal is to identify vulnerabilities and see how we can remediate those vulnerabilities for the client so that they can create a stronger posture overall. So it's not just to say like, hey, I can hack your stuff, I'm cool, but the reporting part is a huge aspect as well, especially in the sense of the OSCP, where most of the points also comes from writing a good report. Definitely agree with Angie. Take screenshots and great documentation as you go along. With the newfound information that we have, essentially I'm going to use netrpc to change the password. Kind of have a command template here. So we're going to change the password of Michael to, we can do something simple, password 123. Here we place Olivia, and then Olivia's password. And the IP will be put here. Okay, we didn't get any errors, but just to make sure, what we're going to do is we're going to run net, what is that? Oh, on IP. This is the command from when I did it before.
No worries. Happens.
There we go.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yep,
So
there it is.
that means that we were able to successfully change the password. And now we can essentially do the same thing, rinse and repeat for Benjamin. We can just change this to Benjamin. Let's just, oh, made a mistake there. This is supposed to be Michael. You can do the same thing for Benjamin just to ensure that the password actually changed. WinRM. We're just gonna check. Okay, these credentials are valid. He just doesn't have WinRM access. So this kind of ties into what I said in the beginning about making sure that you check the various services when you obtain new credentials. Nothing particularly interesting there. And then we can list share. So we see backup.psafe3. This belongs to password safe. So we're going to connect to this share. Now that we have backup psafe3, we can see here from a quick Google search, this belongs to something called password safe. It's version 3. So if we run this command, hashcat help, and then we grep for password safe, you can see that there's two options there for v2 and v3. Since this is psafe3, v3, so we're going to run hashcat m5200. Use it against the RockU password list.
RockU.txt is classic.
Yeah, classic sort of password list for these kind of boxes. So now we have credentials here to log in to password safe. Let's just see how we can install this on Linux. Okay, so we can use apt to install the password safe package. So we're just going to install that, and once we have that, we should be able to put a path to the database. That's right here, psafe.3. Here we have credentials for 3 new users, Alexander, Emily, and Emma. Essentially, what we can do here is credential spray and see which one of these users has valid credentials. Beforehand, another thing that we can also do is check Bloodhound to see what kind of paths might be available for these users. So for example, let's just plug Alexander in. No interesting number of. And then we can do the same thing for Emily. She has remote management users, but also outbound object control. And she has generic write to Ethan. This means that we can Kerberos Ethan using the Kerberos. So we will get to that in a second. And then there's also Emma. And Emma has nothing particularly useful either or interesting. Well, one thing that we have done if we didn't check Bloodhound is utilize exec using the no brute force flag, supply a user and supply a user file and pass file. Essentially, what this will do is credential spray against the IP, and we would be able to see that Emily is the only user with valid credentials. It'd be like how we would do that without any kind of foreknowledge.
So my question, I was about to
Yeah.
ask you what credential spraying was for those who never knew about it, but you kind of already explained it.
Credential spraying is if you have a username or password pairless, you're gonna essentially test it across a service rather than brute forcing. Kind of like a one-to-one ratio of the first, at least netexec, the first user line will get paired with the first line that's in the password file. Basically, iterate through that user and pass list to try and find valid credentials. Actually, do an example, a quick example. So if I open this back up, just copy this. And I know you guys can't see where I'm copying it to because I have monitors, just so that I'm copying it into like GitHub, just so I have the credentials transfer over to a file.
When are we not using multiple monitors, right? It's easier to see things.
So
Yeah.
we can do user and paste the users in here. And then this would be Alexander's password, that first line. This will be Emily's password. And this will be Emma's password. Next, we can take that netexec command that we had right here. New file. Oops. Is that the wrong argument? That's it. One word, yes. Okay. What we just did was password spray. It matched, as you can see, the first user line to the first password line, second one to the second password, and so on. And through this, we can see that we have valid credentials for Emily. Using valid credentials for Emily, we can essentially run targeted Kerberos.py. What this is going to do is, since we have generic write access over Ethan, it's going to grab Ethan's ticket from Kerberos, and we're going to be able to crack this hash for Ethan. We go back here to we can see Emily has generic write over Ethan. And then if we just take a look at Ethan just to see what kind of interesting permissions he has. No interesting member of, let's see what he has. Outbound object control over. He does have DC sync, which will allow us to perform a total domain compromise. Once we're able to get Ethan's credentials, we'll be able to perform a DC sync using Impacket secrets dump on the domain. We'll get to that shortly. This is targeted Kerberos.py. You can find it on GitHub. Run this command. It's already here. Domain administrator HTB, user Emily, password, and we'll just do a verbose flag just to see again what's happening in the background. A lot of times, let's change our Etsy host file. So A lot of times I like to run these kinds of tools with the verbose flag because a common issue that like I've been running into is like clock skew, where time on my machine doesn't sync up with the domain. As you can see here, that happened again. There was a tool that was previously used called, let's just actually connect here. And then you can use get date. I typically use a PowerShell command. I'm actually looking for it. But essentially what I'm going to do is, what's it telling me right here? Okay. I used to use this PowerShell command, get date, and convert it to UTC format and change the time on my box to match the time on the domain controller. That way, when we run our Kerberos, we don't get this error, clock skew too great. There was another way that I've seen it done, was using NTP date, but I believe that's been deprecated for Kali's. I don't necessarily know like the new library that's used for that, but there's multiple ways that you can change the time on your machine, something else to match the domain controller. But the NTP date way was a very efficient way because you can just type it with the domain controller IP and it'll instantly sync your box's time to the domain controller.
That's cool you mentioned that because a lot of people don't know. I was very surprised too. I mean, I've never done this room before. I'm not room. This is not try hacking. This is hack the box. This box before. I think it's really interesting of your approach with this because again, some people wouldn't even think about, for example, saving the variable for a target. You just put the IP address over and over again, and then even checking the Etsy hosts file and then change the IP address and other different things that you've done on there. I can't list every single one, but I think this is a really good idea how you're approaching it.
This is the command that I'd run. So we can see here in UTC time, we should have this time on our box, which we don't, which is why we're getting the time skew error. We can check the status, UTC, UTP service is inactive. If this is active, what can happen is that your box will basically revert the time after you manually change it. Once you try to run the Kerberos command again, it will get the same clock skew error because it instantly reverts. It doesn't save your changes. That's something to keep in mind. And another thing is if you're using VirtualBox and you have guest editions, you might have to disable host time sync from the VirtualBox guest editions, because even if you have NTP service inactive, it will sync to your host time and revert your changes that you manually did. We can enter this 1030. This one will be I think it's as long as we're within 5 minutes or something like that, I think we should be good. We can just check the status again. Another thing would be syncing the hardware clock. So if we run this again, that should go good. And now if we try our Kerberos command, hopefully it doesn't embarrass us. It did. Okay, so we did something wrong here. Oh, there we go. The date. And now let's just move it up 2 minutes. Just to be sure. Now let's check the status again. Should be good. And then we'll run this.
They gave us a long one today.
Yeah. So we get the hash for eating. We can save it in a file, and then we can essentially do hashcat help again. Grab I, just in case you don't remember which sort of mode to use with hashcat. Okay, I did something wrong. Let me just type in Kerberos. Yes, we'll use 13100 because it's a TGS and E type 23, which you can see like notated here within the hash, just in case we're like wondering how like you can decipher between the different options. And then we can do Ethan hash, and then again spam the same old RockU word list. We'll wait for this to crack. And we have Limp Biscuit as Ethan's. We have Ethan's credentials. We're pretty much towards like the last leg of our box, which is running Secret Stump. It's so funny because I think I only used the target variable that I set once, which is again force of habit. Just started using the variables to try and speed things up. But we have the administrator hash here. Essentially, we can take this and we should be able to pass the hash with it using evil WinRM. Let's actually use the target variable this time that we set.
Javon, can I pick your brain for like a second?
Yeah.
What do you mean by pass the hash?
Passing the hash is a technique used a lot of times in Active Directory where instead of typing in the password, like cracking the password and typing it in, you can essentially pass it through NTLM. Essentially, it allows you to log in without, having to know like the actual plain text password. So it's very useful in certain senses where like the password is pretty strong because you don't have to sit there waiting to crack that password. You can just pass the hash over to a machine that has sort of like the same login.
Nice. I like your
Because
definition.
it's kind of off the top of my head, but that was a very good question. A lot of times it's a really good way to like laterally move across like the systems. When you're doing Active Directory, it's I think pretty much a lot of times you'll be passing the hash. Here we have the administrator, and then we'll do the -H flag just to specify hash and not password. Oh, there's an argument user. Try this. I think maybe trying to use the variable is probably messing up the command, which we'll test out in a second. As you can see here, we were able to successfully pass the hash. We can move around, use the directories, and the root is right here. You just type that. And then we have the root flag for the box. And then the user flag is on, I believe, Emily, if I remember correctly, which we can also see here. It's kind of hanging a little bit. Okay. And the user flag is right here. You successfully have the user flag and the root flag for administrators.
Wow.
So pretty, I wouldn't say hard box. I would say it's a very good box to learn how to use Bloodhound and like visualize things. Of course, there's like many other ways to do this. After I completed this box, like I looked up IPSec's walkthrough on it. He had a pretty similar process or methodology, but he did have like some cool additions in there with some custom scripts to manually enumerate like the groups, because the first time he was doing this box, he did say that he missed the share moderators aspect of the user Benjamin. So definitely like look into that. And then also there was a write-up that I saw from, I don't necessarily know his name, but he goes by Maverick. But he had a pretty cool methodology as well, using NetRPC to change the passwords. I would say definitely look at those walkthroughs. This is a retired box, so there's like a bunch of write-ups and video walkthroughs for this as well.
I like this approach. It was very clean. In my opinion, it was very organized. Even if we had like moments where like, what did we do? What did we do?
Yeah.
That's very common, and it's okay to not know at the moment. The best thing to do is to just chill out, backtrack, figure out if it's the like right IP address. Sometimes, like you said, if you save things, you gotta change it up. Automation, you did it too. You showed a lot of different Linux commands for those who are really brand new to Linux and networking and whatnot. So I really like this room. And I also want the audience to know if this room seemed very complicated, Javon actually went back a few steps, broke down each concept. Like, for example, what is pass to hash? Like, how do you even use Notepad? In this case, it was Nano. There's other text editors that you can use that I've seen within cyber and tech. Like, Nano is one of the easier
Yeah.
ones.
I don't think
Yeah.
I'm trying to become a VI kind of person, but I'm still trying to get better at just remembering all of the shortcuts, especially in terminal. So I can definitely get better at that. Like I'm trying to improve on that.
I like VI Vim. I mean, for me, I came from more like a developer kind of background, so I like the command line. It's very comfortable with me. Don't come for me for those who are pro Nano fans. But like when you have a lot going on, especially with the code and whatnot, or even with what's going on in the background with Linux and stuff, it can be overwhelming. And I feel like it's very lightweight. That's why I like VI/Vim besides Nano. That's all I had to say on that end. Don't go
Yeah,
for any types of comments.
but I would definitely say it's really valuable to like learn VI. So I did make a chat GPT kind of make me like VI cheat sheet just so I can like look back at that and remember because at least like historically speaking, VI is more common on boxes than Nano. Nano isn't always installed on every Linux distro. So if you're doing a pen test or something, you might not always have access to Nano. So you're always gonna have to at some point be forced to use VI. Definitely like learn VI or Vim for sure.
Yeah, I agree. When I did the Linux room a few coffee tea chats ago, yeah, it was a prior one. Long story short, they did not have Vim on there. They didn't have a lot of text editors on there. Probably VI on there. I agree 100% with what you're saying. You never know what text editor's there. And if VI is there, which is 9 out of 10 times there, use it.
Yeah.
Since this is a coffee tea chat slash study quarter session, what is your advice for those who are trying to get into cybersecurity? That seems to be one of the hottest topics thus far
Yeah.
in this industry, like in 2025.
I would definitely say that's a very popular topic, at least definitely on like media. Everyone has like their own like takes on how long it takes to get into cyber, like some kind of blueprint or roadmap. But from what I've seen personally talking with like other people in cybersecurity and how I got into cyber, there's not one specific template or like cookie cutter way that you can follow. There's people that have like backgrounds that are like it's not a computer science background or cyber background, they're able to get into cyber. I would definitely say figure out what it is that you would like to do in cyber, but also the fact that cyber isn't necessarily like just like it is an entry level field in a sense, but it's typically people that are in cyber have some kind of like IT background or like networking background, which is like very like essential if you're gonna definitely like be doing like a lot of like the technical aspects, but there are ways to like learn that without being in a help desk job or IT job. But personally, working help desk definitely like helped open my eyes and like get like a lot of like hands-on practical experience and also creating like labs, kind of similar to what we were talking about earlier with TCM security. I did go through like the PNPT course, I think it was. I didn't take the cert, but just like the process setting up like the Active Directory lab, for example, to be able to like tinker and like learn different concepts. A lot of it is hands-on learning, and there's a bunch of resources for a lot of people that got into cybersecurity years ago before cybersecurity was even like a term that was like widely coined. They didn't have as much like resources like HackTheBox, Try Hack Me, Over the Wire, just like a lot of like these different like CTF style sites where you're able to like test in like a controlled environment. Utilize like a lot of like the free resources. There's also something called roadmap.sh, I believe. And I think they have like a roadmap for like cybersecurity there that basically shows you like the fundamental IT skills and operating system knowledge that you need, networking knowledge, and then it goes different, I would say, cybersecurity terminology, like security knowledge and stuff. So like things like zero trust, the cyber kill chain, etc. And it's just like a very like fleshed out roadmap. I would say basically like once you like learn like those fundamentals, you can basically go anywhere. Like there's cybersecurity is such a broad domain.
Yes.
It's not just SOC analysts, it's not just pen testers. There's so many different specialties within cyber they can get into. That's not necessarily like hands-on keyboard in the terminal all day. I would definitely say utilize the free online resources. Don't listen to a bunch of different influencers because like everyone has their own take and you're kind of like getting pulled in different directions on what you need to do. But I would say at least just like the main thing is learning the fundamentals, networking. The job
Yes.
market's pretty rough right now. So like even if you have technical skills or you might have a certification, it doesn't necessarily like guarantee you an interview.
Mhm.
With the way that ATS systems are like filtering through applicants and also the rise of like a lot of like AI tools that are automating these application processes, hiring managers are closing applications within like the first 2 or 3 days because they're getting bombed with a bunch of resumes. A lot of times I would say the best look that you might have is building like those genuine connections by, volunteering at like your local security conference or joining study groups like this, for example. Met some pretty cool people here that are, at companies or places that I want to be in my career in the future. And I would also say just attending like, meetups and events. A lot of like that face-to-face in-person networking and connection and being able to show your personality and a lot of like those soft skills that you don't necessarily get to see from an applicant online is definitely useful in this current job climate.
I agree. I like all your points. Even in the age of artificial intelligence, it's really important to have that in person, even digital connection if you can't, for example, afford to go to a security conference. Do look
Yes.
into discounts and definitely, like you said, network, network, network. Like what we're doing right now. This is a networking event, and I try to do this every month or so. Nowadays, I'm like, doing, what was it, private tutoring, blogging, and then YouTube. What are you up to these days? Are you doing like any projects? Like,
A lot of it is mainly work. Outside of work, I'm definitely, trying to build my skills. So going to the Pen 200 course, like I mentioned, I did start going through the CPTS course, kind of just trying to build like my pen test knowledge and get better at, for example, explaining like the concepts that I'm learning. I find like that's definitely a good learning technique. If you guys are out there learning like me too, definitely sign up for a coffee tea chat. Being able to explain like these concepts to Angie and like a wider audience, it solidifies like your understanding of things and also just improves like your public speaking skills, which is something that I'm trying to develop. Just becoming more confident in the things that I know and expressing those concepts. I would say that's kind of like a difficulty with like a lot of people in tech is that I was mainly introverted, but I've been trying to like force myself out of like my shell because, for example, if you want to become a pen tester, you might have to explain these same concepts to someone that's not exactly a pen tester. Like you have to give like an executive summary. And if you like already work in cybersecurity, staring at a screen all day at the office and then coming home to stare at another screen isn't necessarily the best thing for you. Yeah, I would say for me, it's definitely just being active, like going to the gym, going on walk, that kind of thing. Just making sure to literally touch grass.
yeah, touching grass is really important. I always try to make sure I get my walks in too, and I'm trying to get into like, what was it, Pilates, stretching, so important. A lot of stuff on the screen. You need to just make sure you stretch. I
Yeah.
think that's so important. So many different hours, and it's really important to make sure you put your health up there. This one's kind of out of the ordinary and it's not really mentioned about, but do you speak other languages?
Unfortunately, no. I definitely want to learn. So I did download Duolingo, but I'm not really feeling the teaching style. I did start learning French in high school, and I remember like some concepts from French. So when I was doing the Duolingo French course as like a refresher, I just feel like it kind of misses out on like fundamentals or like sort of like things like grammar or certain rules. So when I was doing Duolingo, I'm like I feel like it's creating a gap in my knowledge. But I definitely want to start learning a new language. I feel like that's very important, especially considering I want to start traveling and going to like different countries soon. It would be nice to know some languages, be able to interact with locals and sort of fend for myself in a country without having to like pull out Google Translate or something.
Yeah, I feel you on that. French is it's a really interesting language. I love that language too. Actually, prior to getting into Spanish, once you know French and you, for example, you're going to like Spanish, you kind of have to rewire your brain a bit because they're two very similar languages. Like
Yeah.
the ending, for example, station, you know how it's like tion in English,
Yeah.
in Spanish, or even in French, it's got the cion. It's like sion.
Yeah.
And it's like you have to, I feel like in French, it's the intonation's like a little bit higher than Spanish. So I have to always make sure that I am not overdoing it with the pronunciation for the
Yeah.
sion.
Yeah.
I agree. I also like the traveling idea because I'm noticing even with the ATC Discord community, it's an international community and there's a lot of folks that speak a lot of different languages. And we also have weekly international language exchange. Unfortunately, there's not French yet because I'm not at a
Yeah.
conversational level, but hey, Javon, if you want to come and show us your French, you may. I think there might be some folks interested in that. But we also have Korean and we also have Spanish, and we're trying to do more cybersecurity presentations because, according to a Discord poll, that was the most requested topic for these language exchange sessions. If we ever want to do like
Yeah.
a French cybersecurity hack the box of what we did today in French, that'd be so cool. We'll change the world with our language learning skills and our cybersecurity skills. There's different areas of cyber that we mentioned today. The red team side, the blue team side, purple team, which is a mix of red
Yeah.
and blue. There's GRC, so governance, risk, and compliance. There's cloud security, AI security. There's a whole roadmap
Yeah.
that you mentioned. And please do share your resources so I can put it in the description box below. Again, appreciate you. Hopefully, this is not our last coffee tea chat session. You're definitely welcome back. Appreciate it. You did an amazing job today. Folks,
Angie.
let him know in the comments that he did a great job.